So I'll say, hi, I'm Rachel from A Mother Far From Home, and I'm talking with Sandy from Language of Listening. And what we were talking about in this call is what brought it up was I wrote a post about, and one part I mentioned, is your child strong-willed or are they self-directed, which is a different thing, and certainly I guess has different connotations as well. And a lot of moms wrote back and said, yes, actually, I don't really think my child was strong-willed in the typical sense, but more so because they were used to kind of doing their own thing, their own boundaries, and I didn't have clear boundaries or rules. And now I really feel the need to have them, but my child doesn't respond to them because I haven't put them in place for the past few years. And it's usually the responses I got were like the 3, 4, 5 age of children.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what we're working towards. And so I'm just really happy, Sandy, that you'll talk through this with me and share some of your wisdom and thoughts, because I saw that a lot of moms were like, yes, that's what it is. Now what do I do? Good question. Yeah. I myself have found that with one of my sons, that I was very pregnant, and it was an unexpected pregnancy, and I was very sick. And so during the pivotal time, I think, when it would have been very easy to just be like, this is the rule, we'll do it, I just was like so tired, and I was just like, it's fine. He's so cute, and then I got past that tiredness, and I realized my husband and I both were like, unlike the other, he's sweet, precious child, but unlike the others, he just didn't respond to our instruction in the same way. And I realized I don't think it's not that he is strong-willed in that typical sense. I really think he is just he's just self-directed, And so we're trying to figure out, how do we now, being self-directed doesn't necessarily seem like a bad thing, but there has to be the ability for him to learn and us to go through together to obey the house rules and to respect our boundaries as well. And that's the struggle, I think, that if we could sort of talk about how that goes together.
Okay, that sounds perfect. Yeah, and I think I want to back up just a hair, because strong-willed is all over the parenting literature.
Mm-hmm.
That, raising a strong-willed child, and what we are actually talking about in that context is rebellious. Won't follow your rules. Right.
Mm.
And so what I think I want to bring the listeners in is that strong-willed is how it may show up, and we even have, what is that diagnosis? Do you remember that one about oppositional?
ODD, oppositional defiance disorder. Yeah.
That one, right. Yeah, they've even created a label for extreme versions of this kind of rebellious, strong-willed behavior, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to just check and see if you're coming into it with a mindset that strong-willed is this thing, and it's a negative thing. It's, it's all about rebellion. It's, it's a child who's very, very difficult to be around often. And so if that's what you're thinking, what Rachel and I were talking about was, if you step back and look at it, what you're actually talking about is a child who is, pretty much making their own boundaries. They're creating their own boundaries. They're very self-directed. They decide what's okay in any case, right? Mm-hmm. And if we haven't been there as the parent to set, strong boundaries that were very clear, that have, of course, in Language of Listening, our boundaries are firm yet flexible, because we have the can-dos, right? We have the alternatives of things you can do inside that boundary to meet your needs, right? So it's a little different.
Let's talk about that later too.
Yeah, we'll go back to that one for sure. But if the child is used to coming up to, like, if you're holding a boundary and just like, that's it, this has to be this way, there's no other choices, right? This will really kick off that self-directed sense, and they will set a boundary different from yours just because it's different from yours, not necessarily because it's something they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
even if it's not what they want, even if you want is what they want, they're going to have something different.
Right. Yeah. And that shows, like, what you're dealing with in those moments is, we call it power struggles, and it is because the child has a high need for power, and if we're in that place of, that's it, just be quiet, sit down, don't move, that's all, just, that kind of mode that we get into, we have a high need for power too, because what we're doing is setting these kind of boundaries that are totally controlling of behavior, right? Completely, where there's no room for the child to put any of their own, choices in there. So you'll get this strong-willed thing developing in response to either very, very rigid boundaries that don't allow any kind of meeting the child's need for power, or when there aren't any. When there aren't any, the child's going, oh, wow, you know, I got to set my own boundaries, and they become very used to that, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's what we're talking about here is the strong-willed side of this, not the strong-willed, the self-directed side that occurs, you know, where they're coming up with their own boundaries, and they've gotten really used to managing themselves, and then we wake up and go, wait a minute, we don't like how they're managing themselves, and, you know, I want to set the boundaries around here because I'm the parent, I should be the authority, right? And then you have this bam, because, you know, the child is used to doing that themselves. So what we're talking about with the self-directed child, anyway, I don't want to leave the other behind, with the rebellion that can come up, that is self-directed as well. But what we need to do there is really go through and acknowledge, you know, that child had a high need for power and how that got that way. You know, we really need to understand it ourselves, because there's, in all cases, and I'll just put this out there, there's nothing wrong with your child. Nothing at all. It's all about us and how we manage our boundaries in those situations, right? And we would react the same way if someone treated us the same, because no one likes to be fully controlled, and no one likes to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what the rules really are. I have to make them up myself. Right?
And then I get in trouble because I didn't
get into trouble,
even though they
because there are rules. Because there are rules that I don't know about, right? You know, and then I'm over them all the time, and then I'm like, the heck with you, I'm just going to go with my own. You know, you can really just step into that child's shoes because each one of us would react the same way, right? So it's not really, you know, a kind of a problem in the person. If there is some sort of a disorder, that's something that you need to deal with and all as well. Right. You know, this is the kind of rebellion that can build up from the way that we set boundaries or don't. Right?
Or don't.
So it becomes the same thing. Yeah. And, you know, and I talk about the self-directed child. There was a really big example where I really understood this clearly. And this is with a little older child. I was in a volunteer situation at my children's elementary school, and came around to 6th grade, and I had been a coach for something that they called the Odyssey of the Mind, which is a competition for kids in problem solving, really, you know. And I saw this little boy who I'd been seeing around the school for a couple of years, and I actually remember when he was much younger, you know, little child, maybe 1st grade or something, barefoot, he'd be in the grocery store at all hours, you know, just in the evening, all by himself. And you saw this kid in the neighborhood just every now and then, all by himself. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? So low supervision, a lot of self-direction, right, would have to occur with a child like that to keep himself safe, to figure out the rules of the world and all of that. And then he was always getting in trouble in school. No surprise, right? Because he had trouble with this authority thing. And, you know, and I saw him one day in the lunchroom, and he was getting in trouble again for creating these really cool, like, contraptions out of the junk that kids left after they finished eating, right? The cartons and the straws and he'd make these really incredibly creative things. And so I stopped him and I said, you know, looks like you're really good at problem solving, you know? And he was like, oh, you know, people don't point that out. They usually come up and yell at him. Yeah, right. You know, they usually yell at him, you're making a mess, you know, throw that stuff away, but get out of, go play to recess or whatever it is, you know. And I stopped and went, hey, wow, you know. And so I started thinking, like, wow, you know, I could do one more of these teams. I hadn't planned on doing it that year, but this kid really needed some help, you know. And my daughter loved the program. She was in the same grade, you know. And I thought, okay, I'll go for it this year and see if he'll come on the team. And I got him on the team. And wow, working with this child was really an eye-opener. And that's where this self-directed thing became very, very clear. Where, you know, we would have rules that we would set up for the meetings or for, you know, the behavior during the meetings. He had a temper as well and wasn't that good at controlling it, is what it looked like. But then I started to realize, no, he's already decided how he controls it. He just marches out the door. You know, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm responsible for this kid. Like, where is he? You know, and then he comes back, you know, and I'm like, okay, I got to relax on this. He's been out by himself in the neighborhood forever. You know, I can't control his every move. He would leave to cool down, and then he would always come back. So, you know, so working with a child like that, you know, it was like, wow, I had to really lean heavily on the strengths and say, okay, so you knew that you needed to go have a cool off time, and you've got a way to do that that works for you. You know, and you came back. That's the important part for me. As long as you come back, I'm fine. You know, that's my responsibility part. So there's my rule. You got to come back. You can't just go off and not come back that day. And that worked, no problem at all. And, you know, and we were having some more trouble at other points. And I actually, it became real clear about self-direction. And I sat down and had a talk with him about it. And I said, you know, I think what's going on here is that you're very self-directed. that you like to decide what you're going to do. You've always had to do that. You're actually very good at it. You've survived on your own all this time. Like, we need to work with that. And that is a skill that a leader could have. We want to put you in positions where you can be a leader. Like, what area of this do you want to lead? And we moved it around like that. And he started to shine, right? And, we took district that year. We won district with this team. It was really fantastic. Transformation all around. And then in 7th grade, this most remarkable award, he earned this award that just blew my mind, because this was a kid, like, I had started to see him in 6th grade hanging out, outside of the fences school after school with some of the older kids smoking, and you knew that was like the route to the drugs and all of that. And he was going down the delinquency trail. And and this intervention seemed to like change his life. I not real sure. I actually know he grew up and got married, and I think he's doing all right. But 7th grade was a massive turnaround for him after this, because he'd been on a team, he won something, he was part of something, the kids took him in, he felt like he belonged, and we were all able to work with him, because we went from, instead of trying to control him and make him do our roles, it's like trying to work with your self-directed, pointing out how that worked and when it worked, and how, and use that for him. So the award that he got in 7th grade was most improved student of the boys.
Wow.
And that's like something that wasn't going to happen. You just know that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
With a kid like this who was constantly in detention in 6th grade, and and everybody was always it was always the punishment route with him. And
so he started to feel like he had something to offer, but you have to be totally different than you are. Well, let's see how. Right. This is how you are, and here.
Self-directed was good.
What are we going to do?
He got that.
Right. It was strengths. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm glad I had a chance to share that story, because that like really framed it for me. It's like, wow, this thing is a strength. Okay, yeah. And when you get that.
I was just going to say, to recap, so when we talk about self-directed, we're talking about kids who, are like to make their own decisions, or they like to do things their way. They have good ideas. They're, strong in their opinions of what they want to do or don't want to do. And they have a high need for personal power, meaning that they do not respond well if they feel completely powerless. And that could look like any number of things or situations, or what, it's endless, the examples we could give, but self-directed kids do not want to feel like they have no power. So the way forward, that is one thing that spurs us on the way forward, is making sure that if we continue in a situation where they feel like they have no power, which is also, would you agree, Sandy, that in situations where they don't know the rules, but then all of a sudden, this is what I like to call the all of a sudden, inside a mom's heart, they know what the boundary is, but there's no rules. So then the child does something, and then all of a sudden mom is mad and yells. And then these are very difficult for a self-directed child to handle, because they didn't know that was, and so I guess that also feels powerless, is what I want to say, because then you're powerless against your parents, how they feel about you or how they react to you, so I guess both sides of that can create powerlessness, if that's right. Too rigid or not enough structure that makes them feel safe. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. And one of the things that's really interesting that we don't think about very often is that a child knowing, like knowing what's coming, knowing how to respond, and knowing what's going to happen, like the rules, like what they are. Knowing things meets a child's need for power. So when you have a child sitting there, thinking they're okay, and then all of a sudden they're not, they're in this like defensive mode, doing anything, scrambling to meet their need for power, which is often making you wrong, right? So that
they have to make themselves right and you wrong, or to
Yes. So now your rule's wrong, and now they don't have to obey it because it's wrong anyway, So I mean,
this is why routine is so powerful, because kids know the routine and they feel good, or I know this is coming up next, and they can kind of have wiggle room within the routine. That also gives them more power, but they know how it's coming. I find that if they know what the next thing is and it's something less fun, like chores or something like that, then they'll kind of have this wiggle room. Well, I'm going to do this part of the chore first, and then I'm going to do that part of the chore next. And it's like they're wanting to feel powerful. And I'm like, fine with me, like that, so that's giving a little power within the rules, and
directing, that allowing them to make the choices inside the boundary,
Yes.
Like they get to direct whatever part of it works for you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the important thing for us. Yeah. It is.
And
And that's why you get the firmness of the boundary or the rule, and then you have the flexibility in how they execute it, which we call can-dos in our model.
Yes, and that's yeah. I think that's the key, isn't it? Is knowing, or first of all, knowing what your actual boundaries are, which, you know, and then being able to say that, or being allowing your child the flexibility within those boundaries and rules, because within what does it matter what the order is or how it gets done? It doesn't really, as long as your boundary's okay. And I guess that's I won't say the struggle, but that's the great path for moms, is figuring out what are my boundaries, you know, and using those to make rules if you need to, and then allowing your child, if they have an alternative that is still in the boundary, to be able to say, okay, because what moms tend to do is be like, oh, but I said that you should do it this way. And if I give in, then I'm going to be teaching them not to do what I say. Whereas, you know, there's this thought in the back of the mind, instead of seeing it like, you know, that was a good idea that still gets done what I want done. So actually that was very creative on that part and good job. You know, it can feel permissive to do that, but that's totally different than permissive, which is not even having those rules or boundaries or expectations.
Well, the permissive thing occurs when you change your boundaries, you know?
Okay.
And it doesn't really feel good to you.
Mm-mm.
You know, it's something like you can always feel that sense of like, you know, like, I don't really like this, but I don't want to deal with the upset. So, you know, like it doesn't feel good to you, right? So I think, like, you know, what we're talking about here is like that clarity. That is the struggle that every parent I've ever known, including myself, has been through. It's like, what are my real boundaries? Because we're not really taught much about this. No. You know, how you identify a boundary. And I thought you did a brilliant thing in that that post that you wrote, the no drama approach to your child's behavior problems. Because to me it was like, bing, it just was so clear. You gave some examples that I'd like to talk about here. I think it's a good time for to distinguish, like, even boundary from rule. This is really interesting, you know, and then can-dos, right? And what I discovered, you know, in just like this reframing that the way you said that did for me, was that rules can be either a boundary, a solid, firm boundary, or they can be just one way to do something to achieve your boundary, right? So rules can be can-dos or boundaries. Now that's important to realize. But let's back up a second to boundaries. Like, what is a boundary really? In my little model, I've got a 3-part model for coaching. It starts with connection, describing what you see, getting into the child's world. That's the say what you see part, right? And then the lines on there between the can-dos and the strengths are what you like. If you see something you like, you know, you say what you see, you're describing what's happening. If you see something you like, you name the strength. Like, wow, you know, you found an interesting way to put all that trash together, you know, that shows you're creative, right? See something I like, describe it, and then name the strength. That's the what I like boundary. That's a real boundary. It's a preference. It's what's okay with me, right? The other side is when I see something I don't like, right? And that's, let me think of one there. Hitting. Let's do the hitting. That's one example to bring up. Okay. So it's like, you know, you say, whoa, you just hit him. You know, the boundary is right there. That's not okay with me. Right? Must be something else you can do to work out the problem, or, you know, like that. That becomes the can do, right? So it's the boundaries are what you like and what you don't like. And guess what? Those don't change. What you like and what you don't like in any moment. Now, maybe over your life they might, but in any one moment, what you like and what you don't like, all you got to do is stop and go, wait a minute, is that okay with me? Do I like that or not? You know, and when it comes to hitting, I will always say no, always firm, solid, never going to change, right? Like that. That's your boundary. Now, the thing, what were you going to say about that? I
was just going to say that is huge, and it's the reason it's so important is because so much, I believe, of the struggle of motherhood, even my early motherhood, is trying to talk yourself out of your actual boundary that you already have. It's like, I shouldn't feel this way because I should feel like I should do this. And so it's like you have a boundary, but you're covering it because you don't want it to be your boundary. And so then you're trying to be different, but you can't. But that means you continually get mad, you continually get frustrated, you're overwhelmed, and then you feel guilty for not being this way. So I think that really happens a lot, instead of being like, this is actually what I feel. So pretending I don't doesn't help, because I already know this is, or I don't want to admit this is my boundary, but just admitting it is very freeing. And
do you have one you can think of? Like, this is a perfect place for an example of like a boundary that you have that you had to wrestle with.
Well, I think that this is this example how they can change. So, but we just moved into a new house, but before, with the house we were in, had older furniture, and so I just wasn't that fussed if they jumped all over it. I just didn't care. We kept a cover over it, so if they got a little bit of food on it, we would just wash it. So in that, I didn't care how they were with that couch. I just actually didn't. So then we moved into the new house, and I got it, which I've been here 2 months. I probably should have covered it with something different. But no, I wanted this, and I still do, so that's what I did. I got a nice, it was a lighter color couch. Well, I didn't communicate what that was a new boundary. So they treated this couch the same as the old one, and I was getting so angry. I mean, for a couple of days, and then I thought, why am I this like King Kong gorilla mom? I was like, it's because now I am not okay with this. I am not okay with food on my couch. I am not, and I kept getting, Rachel, calm down. Rachel, you shouldn't have got that couch. Rachel, you don't need to get frustrated at this. Rachel, stop being so dramatic. Rachel, all this talking bad about myself. And I finally realized I actually like my new flash couches, and I don't want them to eat on them, and I don't want them to throw the cushions on the floor. I don't want them to. The end. That's just what I don't. And when I finally admitted it, and I just kind of was able to calmly be like, kids, we did this there. Here, we're not doing this. And they're like, okay. Now the cushions never go on the floor. Occasionally I have to remind them to bring food, but more or less they remember, and there is just no drama. But if I just would have it actually took me being like, what am I doing? I don't like this. Okay. And then just embracing what I didn't like, and then making a rule that made sense. And occasionally they might say something like, well, mommy, this can't stain because it's this. So that's them acknowledging they know my rule. They know the why behind my rule. Is this okay with me? And if it is, I might say okay, or I might say no. But I'm just true to what I actually, and this is a small example. This isn't moral examples, I know, are more fraught with emotion. This is a furniture example, but all moms live with this. We all have, practical thing. But it took me just really admitting what I like or I don't like. And that can be hard for a lot of moms, just actually admitting it and not feeling bad. Yeah,
yes. Yeah. Not even, and beyond admitting it, just recognizing it, right? From the time we were little, we were trained out of recognizing what we liked or didn't like, right? Yes. That'd be that thing where, like, well, I like candy. No, you don't. You like healthy food. You're
Candy's
like, oh,
no
I
good
do. But yeah, when we contradict kids when they say they like things, it can get confusing, right? Yeah. So we were raised to like, and you should like this. Why don't you like this? You should like this. Everybody likes this. Why don't you like chocolate or something? Everybody likes chocolate. Well, I like vanilla. I guess I don't. I guess I should like chocolate. Whatever. Yeah. But yes, so you come by that honestly. Again, I say that a lot, but we really do. We were raised to not be able to recognize our own boundaries, our own what we like and what we don't like. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got your hand up.
We have to blame other people. This is a side issue, but then we feel that we now need to blame other people for making us upset. When realize if we looked at I'm upset and discover what the boundary is, then we can be upset far less because we can have boundaries that make sense, So it's almost the byproduct of not knowing our boundaries is other people doing things that seem to defy our boundaries, and then us feeling perpetually upset, which is another conversation. But I think that's important. If we always feel like other people are tromping on us, it's maybe, or especially our kids. I think moms can feel victim to their kids for back of a letter. I know we're talking about that in just other discussions, and I think that is not knowing what your boundaries are. And not
that's all it is. I mean, honestly, it does boil down to that. And like, this may sound so simplistic, but your boundary really is what you like and what you don't like. And what you want and don't want comes from that, right?
Yes.
And you can check and see, is this okay with me? So you can see, do I like that or not like that? If you're not in tune with that, most of the time we can grasp what's okay with me and what's not. It's just not okay with me. I don't know why. So you don't need to. Boundaries don't have reasons. They're preferences. They're just like built in. So you have to remember that it comes from here. You have to go and, let me think a minute. Do I like this? Is that okay with me or not? And you just got to go, no, it's just not okay with me. No reason. Don't even need to know why. It's just true. Right?
That's a whole other road. You can get bogged down. The why, the not, the why, but I should, but I shouldn't. It just
is. That's all the shoulds. Yeah, that takes you out of what's true for you, right? Mm-hmm. So when we can recognize and identify what's true for us, that would be the boundary. Now, notice how the preference isn't really about controlling anybody's behavior. It's just what I like and what's okay with me, right? Mm-hmm. So for you, if you want to take the couch example, You want you like the couch the way it is, right? You don't want it to be changed, right? You want it to stay clean, right? You just want those things.
Yeah.
Okay, now here's the cool part. There's a million ways to have that happen, right? You could put a rope around that room and just go and look at that furniture from outside the hall and never go in there. That would be one way. And I don't mean to be ridiculous, but what I want to do is, like, if you can find one way, there's 100 ways. So often we have to go ridiculous to find the first way, and then it opens up the paths in our brain to other solutions, right? And you go, yeah, but see, that's not really okay with me because I got it to sit on. So now we have I want to sit on it and I want to keep it clean, right? These things. Those are what I want. Okay, I want people to be able to sit on those and keep it clean. All right, now you're into the place of rules. You know what you want. What you want isn't going to change. You want people to sit on it and keep it clean. All right, now the rule would come with, like, rules just one way to do that. And it's a way that's okay with you, right? So what's one way to do that? Well, we don't bring any food in and we don't throw them on the ground. How about that? Right? And probably I would add, you don't do artwork on there, right? No markers. So I would have these little things like this. This is what this would be. My rule would be, probably, if you want to say it in the positive form, it would be, the couch is for sitting on and watching, the TV or visiting, whatever. For sitting on, that's all. So then you can try to list, but no, kids are literal. And if you go with the negatives and you leave one out, they'll think it's okay, right? Yeah, so you can get with the what they can do, like you can sit on it, right? You can sit on this and,
read a book. You can read books on
it. And now you could read books. You can do things on this couch that won't get it messy, right? Yeah. And so we can give them a little room there. And then they can say, well, I'd chew gum on here. I'd keep it in my mouth. That wouldn't get it messy. And you get to go, is that okay with me or not? Right? Does that fit the rule? Okay. So the rule is interesting because the rule can be, one way is no jumping, leave the cushions on the couch, no food or other things that can leave a mark. Got it? And if you had adults, no smoking on it, whatever. You could have all these rules, right? So you can say all these things. Those are ways to do it. So a rule can be a can do, right? Which is kind of interesting here, because if the rule is I just want the couch to be like it is, I want you guys to just sit there and keep your feet off of it, and this is just what I want. And then I can look at you and go, no, I don't want that. I want it to be just like this. I can be very firm about that as though it is my boundary. I can accept no alternatives, right? If they say I could bring in a piece of plastic and put it down if I want to do a marker drawing here, you'd say no, because the rule is it's just used this way. You get to do that. You're the mom, right? You get to set the rule. You can set a rule like a boundary. Now, remember, it's different. Rules are about behavior. Yeah,
the boundary is the umbrella of what you like or don't like.
The boundaries are personal. The boundaries are like the being side of it. This is just how it is, right? The rules are the doing part of it. So this is how it is. I like it. I want it this way. Yeah, go ahead and you can explain that maybe better.
No, I was just going to say the rule is like the
behavior
for behavior of the people in the family, whereas the boundary is just what's in you that you like or don't like, or this is how I'm made right now, and this is what I'm okay with and not okay with, and from that can come the rules that are the guidelines for behavior of the people in the house.
That's right. Yeah. So the rules, the boundary is about me, who I am. It's in the being state. It doesn't do anything. I'm not talking about behaviors or actions. I'm just talking about this is just how it is. That's a being state. Okay. All right. And that's me. That's about me. That boundary is mine. It's all about me. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It's mine. It's just true. Right. Okay, good. And then, like you said, the rules are when you're stepping out to control behavior, to control actions. We're going into the world of doing, right? It's very different. So that might help people tell the difference. Your boundary of what you like and what you want isn't going to change. That's just going to be so. And if you try to change them, you're going to be over your boundary, and it's going to be yucky, and it's going to come out as an explosion probably. So when you recognize those, you honor those, that's really the source of your authority as the parent, right? Kids need to see you be able to stand up for your likes and your wants and solidly have that be just how it is.
Yeah, this is just how
they know they'll get to do it when they grow up.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And the reason why, if you want to say, like, I know some parents struggle with this, like, well, why are my wants, outdoing my child's wants, as though it's a battle of some kind. Yeah, right, or race or something. It's because we have honed our judgment over the years. And while we may want some wild things, whatever, we understand how that all plays in the real world, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I might still want candy for breakfast, but I'm like, I know I got judgment around that. I'm not going to do that. You know, I know how I feel the rest of the day. That'd be awful, right?
Yeah.
You know, so as a child, they don't have the judgment in place. So we are the ones that have the judgment, the experience in the world. So we will demonstrate what it's like to live in the world and be able to honor your likes and wants in a way that they, you know, other people don't cross them, because this is just it. This is how it is for me, right? And when I can stand and say, no, that's just how it is. Now we can talk about the rule. You know, if we don't like the rule, we pose another rule that will work and meet my boundaries, and I might consider that, right? Yeah. Certainly a can-do would. A can-do is like that's not even a rule. That's like, how are you going to do this? You know, I'm saying, you know, don't bring anything in there. You know, don't jump on the what are you going to do when you really need to jump? You know, must be something you can do. Yeah. And they can come up with things that are can-dos. They can go jump outside, or you can get a little trampoline for inside, or, you know, they can do whatever they want to do. We can decide if beds are okay or not, you know, all of that stuff, right? So there's a lot of can-dos inside any rule if the rule is the boundary, okay? So I have the rule and then the can-do.
It's an example that Lauren, my friend Lauren from the Military Wife and Mom, obviously, you know, Lauren Sandy, but she gave me this example and said that she got it from discussing it with you, that often part of what our blow-ups are as moms is because we bent our boundaries. So she gave the example of not wanting your kids to eat right before you serve dinner, right? So maybe like, you know, 4 o'clock and dinner's going to be ready at 5, and it's just not okay with you if they snack the whole time. It's just not. And so, but then if the kid asks every 5 minutes and you're like, no, but I said no. And then they're like, please, please. And then finally you give it to them. Well, now you're mad. You're mad at them. Did it, but really you're the one that gave it to them, you know, or whatever it is. So I was chatting with her about it, and so the boundary is, I do not want you to eat lots of snacky food before dinner, but that doesn't mean, but then I realized it's within my boundary if they eat vegetables or fruit. I don't care, because that's good.
So back up a second right there. Let's clarify that, Rachel, okay? Because what you just said is about the child's behavior. So you're already talking about the rule. You know,
okay, maybe
that kind of boundary is, it's not okay with you if they eat within an hour.
Or it's not okay with me. It's not okay with me if they're full before dinner and then won't eat my dinner.
That's what it is. You want your kids to eat your dinner.
You just do. Cooking every night of their lives.
See, there you go. You know, you want them to actually enjoy it. You know, you want to feel appreciated. You want the food to be eaten. That means something to you, right? So you just want the food to be eaten when you put it out there. So, and one of your ways to do that would be to have hungry kids, right? We know the hungry kids will eat more, right? So then, you know, what rule will get me hungry kids? And you go, no eating an hour before dinner, right? So that would be the rule.
Yeah.
And the boundary is, you want them to eat the dinner. You just want them, you know, you want to feel appreciated. You like families eating together and, you know, enjoying the food and having.
And I realized I don't mind if they eat something like carrots or celery or something, because I don't think that'll fill them and it's healthy. And so they'll still eat my dinner. So I didn't realize that that's what it was. And then I was like, no, actually, yes. For all of these, you were able to list them all out there together, but it took me forever to know, why am I so mad if they want a snack? I'm getting so mad. I'm like, get out of the kitchen. Nobody's getting a snack. I'm going to burn all the snacks.
No snacks in our house ever again. There's the rule.
No, because to me, I spend all this time, you know, I'm spending time cooking, and I want us to have a nice dinner, and I value this time, and I can't force them to value it or not value it, but I can say that it's not okay with me if you guys all just fill up and then act like you don't want to come to dinner. That's not going to be okay with me. You know?
There it is. Yeah. So so you want hungry kids. That's what you want. You want hungry kids.
And then I want to fill them.
The rule is, you know, and you what?
Then I want to fill their tummies, you know.
That's right. You want to fill their tummy. You like doing that. You like nourishing your children, right? See, those things are things you don't want to give up, right? You just don't. And, you know, so you're like, okay, so I want hungry kids. That's kind of a logical thing for that. So then you create a rule that gives you hungry kids, all right? And then the kids will buck that rule, right? So you have to look at it and go like, okay, and this is where it's weird, because the rule is in the middle. The rule could be your boundary if you owned it and just said, no, that's it. You know, there just isn't any eating before, you know, an hour before. That just isn't, you know. And then you have to look at that 5 minutes before the hour and watch them come in and try to eat everything then, right? Because kids will work around it.
Yeah.
But,
and you have to be, it has to be a real boundary, because if it's not, you will be, or whatever, sometimes we just cross our boundaries, but many times we make rules because we think they're the right thing, but they're not actually a boundary. And then we don't really we kind of try to keep them, but we don't. And then we feel chaotic and out of control, and then we get angry. But it was
because, get this, because we don't know the difference between the boundary and the can-do. Right? If you could identify right there, and I even put that in my little book with an example about throwing a ball in the house, right? There's this thing, like if you keep going over what we call boundaries, right? Then it's not a boundary. You're probably, what you're probably dealing with is a rule that's actually more of a can-do. It's just one way to achieve your boundary, right? So if you identify that and go, wait a minute, I'm in the rule zone.
You want to share that? The example, it's a great example. Do you want to share the ball example?
Okay, well, let me just clarify the framework just really quick here. That, this goes again to where the boundary is from inside. This is just so for you. That's never going to change. The rule is one way to achieve this. And then the can-dos will be a lot of solutions the kids can come up with, and you don't really care how they do that, as long as they're inside either the boundary or the rule, right? But the rule is in the middle. So this rule could be a boundary. It could be very firm, or this rule could be just one can-do, right?
Yes.
And if you're constantly in any situation where the children are bucking this rule, deferring to the child, right, then it's probably just a can-do. And you want to own that. It doesn't mean you're soft or, permissive or anything. It just means that, oh, whoa, what if it's a can-do? And I'm like, oh, all right. And I'm pretending it's a boundary, I think it should be a boundary, but it's not really my boundary, because if it was my boundary, I'd hold it, Like, okay, so if my rule is no eating 1 hour ahead, then I'm going to decide, is that just one way to get this done? So when they come up and say, well, I could eat healthy stuff, and then is that okay with you? You'd be like, well, my boundary really is over here. This rule isn't my boundary 1 hour. That's just one way. That rule is a dang can-do, right? So I can be flexible on that rule so long as it meets the boundary. The boundary's not flexible. The can-dos are. So you got to just stop and look and see if your rule is a boundary or a can-do. And in this case, with throwing the balls, right? It's in my little book, Say What You See, for parents and teachers.
I'll link it.
And it's on It's on my website. You can go read it right there. It's not a flip thing anymore. It's sliders. Anyway, so it's mobile. But I talk about, that everybody has this moment where the child's in the house throwing a ball, right? And you may have this rule called, no throwing balls in the house, right? That just might be this rule that you think you should have, that everybody should have.
Seems reasonable.
Seems reasonable. Got lots of reasons for that, okay? And this is important, because the reasons will take you to the boundary. But, so I've got this rule of no throwing balls in the house, and the children are throwing a little bit, and you're like, I don't really want to disturb that. It's not really doing anything, And then comes the big wham, right? And then you're like, well, I told you no throwing balls in the house, because you're like, whatever. Because you've been putting up with it forever in this realm of like, little throws are okay with me, whatever, and then you think like, why can't I just hold this rule of no ball, just leave those balls outside, why can't I just do that? But they keep
why am I not consistent? Why do I not enforce
consistent? There it is. I'm not I'm supposed to be consistent. All parents have to be consistent, or the children will know, and blah blah. Anyway, so this consistency thing is what I'm getting you off the hook about. If you take a look at it and you go, okay, if you're not consistent about no balls in the house, and the balls turn out to be okay so long as they're being thrown low or controlled, and they're not okay when they're like looking like they're going to break things, then you're looking at the reason for the rule, which is what I like and what I don't like. I don't want my stuff broken. I just don't, right? So when they throw it low, the stuff isn't likely to get broken. Right? Yep. If they go into a little area of their house where there's no breakables, right? They can throw it in. I don't care. They take it in there, no problem. So I'm like, oh, so when I clarify my boundary and go, wait, I don't want stuff broken, then I can come back and go, it's different. It's different. And it explains, like, I'm real consistent about that. Every time it looks like something's going to get broken, I'm going to step in and intervene. That is not going to happen in my house, right? So it's like, you're probably consistent to your real boundary.
To the actual boundary, not just the rule you decided might seem reasonable.
Yes, because that rule then is just one way to keep things from getting broken.
Yes.
Right? And there could be another way. Throwing things low could be another way, right? So the new rule for the kids, they're functioning inside of, first, number one, they recognize our real boundaries. They can tell the difference
That's
right?
why they
So
can
they
come up
know
with so many different ways, really intelligent things. My kids,
millions of ways.
they're intelligent ways. And I think, man, yes, that is a good way. It's within my boundary. It's not what I would have thought of, but hey, win-win.
And they'll even tell you if you say, wait, no balls in the house, and they'll go, well, I'm not breaking anything, and you never even said that, but they know. Like, and you're like, oh, then what you want to do is, oh my gosh, really acknowledge your children. Because again, this is where they will come to ignore you if they're very reasonable and you're pretending they're not because you're trying to hold some rule that, doesn't have to be that way, and they're right. Yeah. Anyway, so you want to acknowledge them and tell them things like, oh my gosh, you're right. The real boundary is no breaking things. You got that. I wasn't even aware of it, and you knew it. And you've been operating inside of that. You've been following that rule forever, like the rule of don't break things, right? You've been real careful about that. So you're throwing this way and throwing, and then you go into space that, like all that. And then once in a while it'll get out of hand and it'll be like, oh my gosh, So, so I want to acknowledge, you want to acknowledge the kids for how reasonable they are and how right they are about, you know what, that is the boundary. Now let's take a look. My rule has been no balls in the house. Now first I want to check in with me and go, is that really how I want it? If I look at it and go, look, I just don't want to have to think about balls in the house. I don't want to have to think about stuff. I could stay with that. Yeah. I've acknowledged the child for recognizing real boundary, and now it's my turn to go, wait, what rule is okay with me? What rule? I can keep my rule of no balls in the house now that I understand what it is. And I can make it a boundary. Okay, kids, I get it. That was very thoughtful of you. You understood it. You reasoned, good judgment, all those things. And the rule still is no balls in the house. We're really going to do it this time. Because now you can. Now you understand it yourself. So that can become the behavior boundary. The boundary can go from just what I like into an actual control of action. That's just how it's going to be. So there must be something else you can do when you want to throw a ball. Maybe there's some other way you can get the energy out, or you can go outside, or whatever it is. We'll do something to accommodate that. But we want to make sure you get to throw balls, and we want to make sure there's no balls in the house. That's my rule. You get to do that. Or you can change and go, you know what? It's okay with me. So long as, and you might have an older child who can do this. So long as you control that, and you've obviously shown good judgment. You're throwing it in a place where there's nothing on the wall, or you're rolling it and you're keeping it low. And if it looks low, you pull it back. I'm seeing you do that. That sounds like you are responsible. You can handle that. We'll go with the rule of, balls that are kept under control are okay in the house. You can do that either way, right? And you could hold consistent with either one of those because you now are connected to the source. You know what is okay with you and what's not, and what the point is. So it changes the whole dynamic. And it's no longer, the child's fault when they break something because they're outside your rule and you're feeling bad because you should have held the rule because it was really your responsibility. And that's when we do the blame. We put it on the child when we're really, it's our own issue, right? Because blame, believe it or not, meets your need for power. And that is an entire other conversation we can have. It really works, right?
This is huge, Cindy. This is really, it just highlighted to me something I realized what a boundary, just to give a quick example and then we'll go, but is that I often, things around the house, because it's a new house and we've got a lot of new, well, the house isn't new, but we got quite a bit of new stuff. And so I've been getting very agitated because my boundary is damage of property. I hate when property is damaged. So the couch thing goes into that. It's just part of the boundary. There it is. Like my property damaged, the house property. So or even if there's another example where I feel like something in some property was damaged. So then often I think I need to make a rule like, well then I would have 400 little bitty teeny rules, but the boundary is just, and kids, if I can express that to them, they can extrapolate it to many different situations, like, anyway, I have to think about it further, but it just came up for me that is an example. This is my boundary, destruction of property. So there might be little rules around different things in the house I might put into place if something consistently seems to get broken. Maybe I think, okay, this is not got to now be a rule because, anyway.
Or if it's getting broken, you move it.
Oh yes, of course. No, yes. Like if something is consistently getting done, I feel like or for example, we have chalkboards, and so the kids like to chalk, and then they like to paint them with water to clear them. But if they did the water too thick, it drips down, anyway. So last time they came to me, I didn't even realize that this was my boundary, but they came to me and my son's like, I have a paintbrush, but I'm going to do very thin strokes so the water doesn't drip. And my son and I laughed. My husband and I laughed because we were like, I didn't even have to say it. He knew that, you know, and then it turned out that it was thick and they kind of did. So I was like, okay, everybody clean it up. And I said, clean it up. And they cleaned up, you know, all the drips. And I was like, really, this picture is fantastic. I'm really impressed by y'all's creativity. Honestly, I never would have imagined y'all could have done such teamwork. It's such a fantastic picture, but we're not going to do that again because there's just no way to contain that amount of water, basically. And it's causing it and it's getting all over the basement. Anyway, whatever.
Hang on, but no way you're going to do that again in the house.
In the house. Okay.
Those like great can do for that one.
Mm-hmm.
Fenced. You've got a fence. You've got some kind of, you know, something outside, garage door maybe, I don't know, that they can chalk vertically and they can wash it off and it can run on the ground, and that's fine. You know, like, so there's a can do for almost everything.
The can do would be that you can do the chalk and you can do the paint with water. We can find you surfaces outside. We can even walk around and find somewhere that you can do this for hours. Just not this one. This is going to be used for menu planning or whatever.
Yeah, and then oh my gosh, you can even get into like community stuff. You know, we can go talk and find a place we can beautify. We can go to the church and see if they'll let us, you know, like, I mean, really, you can move it into like a mural project for your team of children, that you could take this moment and through can-dos turn it into something fantastic, right?
Yes, that's a good point. That is.
Yeah,
it was. I mean, I was really, you know, I didn't get mad, but I realized it struck me inside because my boundary is, you know, not having chalk dripping down my newly painted, like this feels like destruction of property, not destruction, but, you know.
Onto the floor, into the rug, whatever. Yeah, for sure. You know, like you got it. And the thing is that your child knew, and this is what I love, that they come up and say, I'll paint it really thinly. You can say, wow, you know, and do verbalize this. This is the strength. See something you like, right? You describe it and then you name it. So it's the you know, like you knew, you know, you knew destruction of property was not okay. You know, wasn't okay with me. Sounds like it's not even okay with you. Boy, if you can internalize that, whoa, you're really doing something.
And he did. They actually did it thin. It was just after 45 minutes of thin, it didn't really matter, you know.
Exactly. But you acknowledge that, you know, like when he comes, you say, wow, you're thinking, you know, like that would be inside the boundary of keeping things from being destroyed, you know, and you can even say things like, I'll bet you while you're putting it on, right? We can lean in a little forward and say, I'll bet you while you're putting it on, you'll watch and see if any drips go to the bottom. Now, they might not have done that before.
Yeah, but now they might.
But you could suggest that in that moment of like, you knowing how it could possibly go, and they don't. Right. So you can bring those things up in the moment, like, wow, you know, once you've acknowledged the strength of, you know, good judgment, whatever it is, you know, that shows good judgment, that you could use little bitty thin water and it wouldn't go down. Right. And then you just add it. I bet you'll watch to see what it's doing, because you know that the chalk on the rug, because he does know, right? It's why he's doing it. You know the chalk on the rug wouldn't, or on the floor would not be a good thing. Chalk water down there. So, you know, I bet you'll even watch that. And then you come in and you even can check and see, like, oh, look, you saw that drip and you caught it. You know, then you won't have that junk building up, because they're experiencing their strengths all the way through it and becoming more observant, more attentive, and all of those things, right?
And they like to feel like my kids, and I'm sure everybody's kids, like to meet my boundary. They like to know what it is and tell me how they've met it. You know,
they like to feel responsible. They like to feel like they have good judgment. They like to feel like it's their boundary too, that they set it. Like, I get that. I don't like messes, you know, on the floor, but I know it can be damaging, you know, and they'll come from there. So our job is to anchor all that in them so that they're seeing it and experiencing the whole thing. And if you don't, you know, if we go away and think, oh, they'll handle it, and they don't, and you come back, and the cleaning up is excellent little restitution there at the end, so that they can feel good about themselves, because their intention was not to damage the floor. Right?
No. And they did an excellent
And you say that. You didn't mean that to happen. You know, you would never want that to happen, because you don't want your things damaged in the house you live in. And then you raise kids who get that that's who they are. They don't want things damaged. They don't want to live in a messy, damaged house, right? Which is true of most kids, right? So it's so cool. We can just call that out in the process like this. And then they can, you know, increase their judgment, you know, improve their judgment, you know, just exponentially, right?
That's
and then you really can, when they say, I'm going to use a little thin brush, you can go, you know how to do that. You watch for drips. I saw you do it, you know? So you know, because you know you could do it. And you're just, you know, going to transfer that to them so that they can manage inside those boundaries. It's very, very cool. And the one other thing I wanted to bring up on this, is we do want to close, is the permission giving side of it.
Yes.
Yeah. And this one's really cool. If you're having trouble setting boundaries and holding them, because, you know, that's always been a struggle for you, this other side may be an interesting way to go. It's when the child looks at you You know that look, like they come up to do the water on the wall or whatever, right? And there's this glance, they're checking, right?
Yeah.
Oh, what a great moment, because they're checking because they recognize, number one, the boundary, right? It
Yeah.
isn't that they don't know whether or not to do this water on the wall thing. They're checking something with you. So they are honoring your authority in this as the rule maker, which is beautiful. And we want to support that and remain the authority and the rule maker in our houses, right? That's what we are there to do, right? We do that by giving permission. So if they're, getting ready to put this thing on the wall and they glance over at you, you go, that's okay with me. You know how to do that. You can name strings in a controlled way, whatever it is, to make sure nothing is damaged. I've seen you do that before. And they're like, okay, good. So you're like giving permission. Whereas if the child looked at you and you didn't say anything because it's okay with you, and then they went ahead, guess who just decided whether or not that they were inside the boundary? They did. Right? So you just turned over your authority to them to decide about these rules, right? And that's not a good situation at all. So for this checking moment in particular, to be sure that you verbalize when something's okay with you, right? Kids are, doing my thing, throwing the ball. I've got this thing about throwing the ball, low in the house or something, right? And I look and they're starting to throw the ball and they look over or I look over and then our eyes meet and then I say, that's okay with me. You can throw it low like that. If
that happened to me.
The rule, that's okay with me. I need to verbalize it to maintain my authority in the household, which is my job. It's
that happened
like
with my
nasty thing. I'm on their side to support them and give them ways to solve every problem and meet all their needs inside of my boundaries, right? I don't need to change my boundaries to do that. And it's good for them. Oh my gosh, the other piece is that it's so good for them to come up against solid rules. I mean, they do it anyway. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. And I talk about that in my book too, that kids will invent rules in order to challenge themselves. Children are all about challenges. They are constantly challenging themselves to master their strengths and their skills and their physical abilities, right? Constantly. That's what their job is. And they're natural at it, right? They will invent a rule if there are none, right?
Yes, they do. They'll
invent grocery store.
Each other.
For each other, they like that too. That's the controlling the other person. That's the next step. But there's this one cool one called games. They will invent a rule. They'll be walking along and they'll be like, different tile colors or something. And all of a sudden you can only step on the brown ones. Like where did that, that's a rule. That's a boundary rule so that they can practice and build their strengths, which is why rules are not a restrictive thing. They don't keep your children from growing. They don't keep your children from meeting. They're just like, wow, another challenge point. Must be some way I can get my needs met inside of this boundary, which is what children are all about, and they'll do it even if we don't, right? So it's so it's not, boundaries and rules don't have to be heavy controlling things. They're just this thing that's okay with you. You're solid about it. The child will bounce up against it so long as you hold it. You're like, yep, no, that's not okay with me. That's fine with me. That's our job to do that part. So that's what I wanted to say there.
I love that. And I have an example with the ball. Actually, it was my 4-year-old. He kind of bounced a ball and it went too high close to the fan. And I was like, and inside my mind, because I had remembered your example from the book, I thought, do I care? Do I want a no ball rule in the house? I was like, I don't, I will never. And I know that I will never enforce that because I don't care. But then I thought, again, I didn't recognize it as at the time, but I don't like things to be damaged. So I said, I don't want it to bounce because I don't want it to hit the fan or put a hole in the ceiling. So then my 4-year-old said, what about if I roll it? Because this is him coming up with a way. And then I thought, I actually am totally fine with that. I was like, I'm fine with that. You know how to roll. And then he did. And then he didn't bounce it again. But it was that example. Like I was able to say, I'm fine with that. That works for me. I'm good with that. Sounds good, whatever it is. And he naturally came up with a way. And then we both felt good. He felt good. I felt good. Everybody felt good. And I wanted to say, basically coming off exactly what you said, that when rules feel heavy and bad and it's probably something to do with our own self and our boundaries. Because if it's just clean and fresh and this is just the rule, I don't need to get all crazy about it, then the kid's just like, okay, that's the rule. That's what mommy wants or doesn't want anyway, and then, but when we're feeling all about it, that's a sign, I think, for us to dig in and think, what's going on inside me? Do I think rules are bad? Or whatever it is, to dig into what we're feeling. Because kids pick up if we're feeling all junky about it, but they just expect there to be rules. Of course, there's just, like you said, they make up rules when they didn't even have to be. So they expect them from us.
Yeah, and they can let us be. They can let us be that weird mom that just doesn't like balls in the house or whatever, They can let us be anything so long as it's okay with us to be that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we have this, what we like, what we don't like. I don't like loud noises in my house, right? Kids are
Yeah.
loud. I understand they're loud. They can go do that outside, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I
Mm-hmm.
just don't like it. I will never like it, right?
Yeah.
That's how it is. And they can go, oh, that's right. This is the house where you have to be a little bit quieter, you know? And they
Mm-hmm.
totally can respect that, so long as I'm clear that that's what it is. So for you, that clarity about, you know, I don't want what did you say? What's
I
yours?
just don't like property to be damaged.
That's it. That's it. And so this is so cool, because as your kids get older, you can pull your rules about how to do that down and down as they master those, right?
Yes.
Because then those will become their solutions for not destroying things. And
Mm-hmm.
then you don't even have to have that. It's just like, you know what, you guys are old enough now. I don't want things destroyed. You
Yep.
can figure out how to do that. Run it by me, and I'll let you know if that rule's okay with me or not. You can make up something of your own. You get to do that so that they get to practice what it's
Yeah.
like to be in that
And
position.
it's freeing. I think there is an actual tangible sense of freedom when you know what your boundaries are, because then you're also able to let go of the things that are not your boundaries. And then you have so much more space to actually be consistent. Well, because you already were, but you have so much more space to just, you know, manage, for lack of a better rule, the rules and boundaries that you do have. And you can do it happily because you're not strung out on. I had a post that resonated with a lot of moms about when you have all these rules you think you should have, but they're not your boundaries. You don't keep them. And then you live in a sense of defeat and discouragement because you're not consistent. But a large part of that could just be because they were not rules that you needed, that you really felt strongly about.
They were can-dos. They weren't,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
maybe they were some that you just took on because you thought you should, and you didn't even like them to begin with. So they don't
Yeah,
even
right.
represent your boundary. Those are
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
Some of those.
So there's freedom in, you know, and that's, so I guess to bring it back around to the self-directed and the strong will, which this is all about that, but is really the first step is when you feel like, okay, I have a self-directed child now. The first step is actually evaluating what your boundaries are, going through the day and thinking, okay, this set me off. Why did this set me off? What is it? What is that boundary? I guess doing the work to figure out what your boundaries are. And then, you know, I guess if you have to make rules to go with them, or sometimes those are rules themselves, but it's knowing that's the first step. And, or I don't know if it's the first step, but it's a huge step.
It is. It is the first one. Even like self-directed or whatever the situation, if you have a repeated struggle over a boundary, just know that's a growth point for you.
Yeah.
And that means you've got to go internal. You've got to be reflective on that. You've got to go, what is it about this that I'm not this automatically holding this boundary? What is it? You know, how come I'm always mad? Why are kids always crossing this boundary? Is how it feels. The point is, you're not holding it. It's not real. You know, if it were real, they wouldn't cross it. Yeah. So the first is, it's the first step really is reflect. Go, wait a minute. You know, am I clear about this? Right. And then you can use the idea of like, okay, what's my real boundary? Look for your reason. Look for underneath it. What's okay with you? What do you like? What do you not like? You know, what do you want? What do you not want? What's okay with you? What's not okay with you? Get to that till you're at the level like you just were of, I don't like property destroyed. Whoa. Geez, that explains a lot, doesn't it?
That explains so much.
And then you can come back and go, okay, so there's this rule, and this rule, I wasn't that's more like a can do. That's just one way to not damage it. It's actually, I'm actually a creative person, and I'm actually somebody who likes to encourage my children to be problem solvers. So I don't really like having rules that are too restrictive when I think the child might have some input that could be useful here, you know?
Yeah.
So then of course I wouldn't be real consistent with any rule that I would set, you know, and you don't want to, if when they're about the behavior, unless it really, really is, I just want it this way. Like I've got one. I don't want crumbs on my counters in my kitchen.
Okay,
I'm really picky about my kitchen, right? It's like a stupid thing. I just don't want crumbs on the counters, period.
Yeah.
So that's my rule. Like no crumbs on the counters. You got it. Nobody puts them there. Nobody what? You wipe them the second that they get there. I want clean counters, right? I want clean counters, no crumbs, none of that. You wipe it down. So I've got real strict rules about what to do in my kitchen that are boundaries for me. And it's like I come in and it's like, whoa, you know.
What happened?
I don't even want to know you've been here. You know, I can tell, you know, you were here and you were, you know, back over here, handle this. You know, like that's just a real, that's a rule that's like a boundary, right? But then there's a lot of ways. You can use the sponge or you can use a paper towel. I don't care what you do. Just, you know, use.
You can lick it off the counter.
You can don't lick it off. No, because that'd be germs. That's not okay with me either. Perfect. You know, but like, it's like that, just that little clarity of like, what is it really about? You know, what's okay with me and what's not, and then what are some rules that could handle that? what rules do I feel like, no, that I want that rule because I just like that rule, right? That's a boundary, man, you know, and then the can-dos are inside that. Or, well, this is one way to do it. We'll try this and see. And if this isn't it, somebody else can come up with an alternative. That rule's a can-do.
And that gives power. Either way. That gives power to your child who's wanting power. Because part of I notice children, it's like they want to tell me that they understand. They want to give a creative way because they have noticed that I respond all up and down positively, inside out, to creative problem solving. I just like it.
That's it.
Anytime they come up with something, I'm just like, wow, that was a good, you know, and so then they like to say, this was the rule. I've come up with another way. And sometimes I'm okay with it. Sometimes I'm not, but I sense they're doing that. They want to have power and they want to show they can think. And so that's the danger is cutting that off just to hold to some rule that doesn't even really matter. That's
that. If it's actually a can-do, you don't want to do that. And we can do that. We can put these rules out there as a boundary, and it gives the children one solution, and they can get used to that. And you know, and when they can like respect that one, then we can say, okay, good. Now you've learned these new skills or have these new judgment abilities or whatever it is. You know, we have one way that this will at least work. Now you can give me alternatives. Somebody else want to offer some other rules that would work for this boundary. And it gives them practice in rule making. Yeah. Which is wonderful for children.
Rule making also
good at it. And it is problem solving. Rule making is problem solving. You know, I'll do it this way. I can do it this way. But that's a rule. It can be. I love it. I see little kids practicing this in the grocery sometimes. I remember this one day. It was the candy thing. You know, I was walking through the aisle and this little guy, you can just hear them. They have that perfect formula. They understand the boundary and then the rule thing. We don't. They do. The little kid's going, you know, I like chocolate. I'm having chocolate every day for breakfast, right? Just from a boundary to a rule, right? Kids are, mom, of course, goes, oh, no, you're not, you know, like unless you're in France, maybe I remember they did that there, but
in Italy,
in Europe, chocolate is actually, you say, well, when you go to France, you can have that, but there's lots of candy. But it's so funny because you'll hear kids all the time piping up with, you know, they like or want something and then they'll make a rule. So that's how it's done.
That's the always never too, isn't it?
Always and never. Yes, I always will have chocolate for breakfast.
Because I like it. Yeah.
Because I like it. Yeah, there it is, you know. And so they're practicing, and it's a good thing for them to practice. And you can go, wow, you just made a rule based on a boundary, something you like, you know, and that one's not going to work for me. You know, that's something you can maybe do when you grow up. You can decide for yourself. Right now, this is what we're going to do. My rules, right? You know, I'm the authority here because I have the judgment. Right. And as they have judgment, they get to take over rulemaking. It's just really cool. So, yeah, it's a wonderful process when you're able to see it that way. But, yeah, the initial point is this, if it feels like you've got a strong-willed child, you know, it feels like if they would just stop pushing on this boundary, then I would be okay. Right.
Yes,
there's that blame
but they're never going to do that. Or they're never going to just.
You got to know it's not theirs to do. That's
right.
Your boundary. It's for you to hold your boundary. It's for the child to find alternatives to meet their own needs, right? That's you know, that's a whole nother conversation too. It's not all our job to meet all of our children's needs. They're very good at it. We just need to set up the environment where they can do that. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, so lovely.
This has been excellent. This has been excellent, Sandy. So I'm really excited to share this. I know this is going to be really helpful. I know my moms are a lot similar to me in that they're feel very emotionally fraught about parenting because they take it so seriously. I don't know how many emails I've got from readers who were like crazy research scientists and like surgeons and all these kind of things and had kids and decided to stay home and felt completely out of their element. And I remember them writing me and thinking, how could this person value anything that I'm talking about? Because they're so out of their element and just want to get it so right. And we can make everything so fraught with emotion that it just becomes almost too dramatic to bear. But getting to the boundary, I felt, has reduced so much emotionally chargedness. You know, it removes this idea that anybody is to blame. You don't need to get mad at anybody. It just is. And that somehow is just like pops the pincushion of the pressure, you know.
Yeah, well, you know what it is? Honoring your own boundaries is self-respect.
It is. It is.
And if you respect your own boundaries, when you respect your own boundaries, your children do too. Yeah. And that's how we set up this whole relationship based on respect. The kids love it. They love to be respectful. You know, they feel good about themselves when they're respectful, responsible, have good judgment. They feel so good. You know, all of us do. right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you can raise kids who are in touch with that, like, you're just way ahead of the game.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sandy.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Rachel.
It has.
Have to do it again.
We will, definitely. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Right. So we can cut there.
Okay.
Excellent.